Joker, the Phantom Thieves of Hearts, and their picaresque flair are finally on Switch, courtesy of Persona 5 Strikers. They're bringing fast-paced combat, familiar Persona mechanics, and a new story, all wrapped up in their signature style and a summer vacation across Japan. It might hit some overly familiar beats and have some pacing issues, but this is still its own kind of showstopper, and one of the best warrior-style games I've played. As mentioned, Strikers reunites the Phantom Thieves for their summer vacation, placing and pacing the game's events over the span of a single month. Joker's back in town with friends welcoming him with open arms as they work out their plans with a new virtual assistant named Emma. Soon, though, they realize that things aren't quite right with the sap that draws them back into the cognitive world of palaces. This time around, though, they aren't stealing treasures to change hearts, but instead infiltrating jails to return stolen desires to the people. It serves as an excuse both to get the thieves back to what they do best and to play with familiar ideas in new ways. Much of this is introduced and clarified in the game's opening hours, making things a bit exposition heavy out of the gate before the gameplay really picks up. This is all a significant trimming from the typical months-long time frame of the series proper, but time only passes for story reasons. Nowhere trying to figure out the best use of finite days or pushing yourself to explore the metaverse for as long as possible before leaving. This allows you to work on optional requests at your leisure, as well as grind or experiment with new personas. In fact, you can come and go from the game's jail dungeons as you please, a concept that took a while for me to get. It almost felt wrong popping out to heal and restore SP, but it does wonders for letting you play on your terms versus the game's. Even without that, healing and restorative items are easily accessible, either from various shops or cooking up recipes in Joker's kitchen. If anything, the game's items serve less for healing purposes and more for capturing the vibe of the various Japanese cities you'll visit. Regional dishes and snacks are but one of the ways that P5S makes the most of its countrywide caper. Various landmarks and tourist destinations, or at least royalty-free stand-ins for them, pepper the dialogue and story. Having visited and even lived in one of the cities featured in the game, it nails the vacay vibes and cultural shoutouts for its larger locales. They may only be backdrops to the story and hubs to check between the action, but I couldn't get enough of Striker's Tour of Japan. While the core narrative hangs above the whole experience and drives the cast, some of the best moments come from these teenagers just getting to relax and be teenagers. It's a shame there aren't mini-games or activities to further embrace that, but it still mimics the original game's excitement in adding more corners of Tokyo to your list of destinations. While the likes of Osaka and Sapporo get the full treatment, a few places in the game are a bit more minimal. One was basically a single cutscene, while others offer briefer jails tied more to the plot than the places themselves. This would be fine if it were for pacing reasons, but it was in those moments that the game decided to lay on cutscene after cutscene. I sat through what felt like an hour of these back to back right in the middle of the game. This won't be too unfamiliar for Persona fans, but it does contrast the more actionized gameplay. It's also worth noting that for its first half, Persona 5 Strikers sticks to a certain formula. You arrive in a city, you learn about a monarch in their jail, you reach 3 key points therein, infiltrate to learn their history, leave the calling card, fight the boss, bang boom, you're in, you're out, you're done. This idea of a recurring pattern to its parts is one that comes up in each of the modern Persona games, but consider yourself warned if you've yet to experience them. That amount of story content does a lot to make Strikers feel like a full-on sequel to Persona 5 rather than a spin-off, but a few core pieces get lost in the process. Social links are gone, as are the deeper and more focused looks at your comrades and confidants. As such, every cast member is reduced a bit to their bare essences, rather than the flawed and investable portrayals from their origin. That does make sense, because this is a sequel, they'd already have gone through all their character development. But it's a shame that the Phantom Thieves as people are sidelined for the Phantom Thieves as a group. That said, they're a fun group to hang with. They know how to get down to business, but this is still their summer vacation, and they're living it up. There were legit laugh-out-loud moments, and everyone does get at least one big chance to remind you why this gang means so much to them. And hey, you don't have to rush to max out your relationship with Haru this time. Right? The lack of social links doesn't mean you can't work on those friendships, though. A new bond system is in place, building up both over the course of the game and by taking the time to chat with her friends or help them out when necessary. The points you gain from this let you unlock passive increases to your abilities, such as longer buffs and debuffs or after battle healing, or grant you access to things like locked treasure chests and better recipes. Instead of who we already know and love, Persona 5 Strikers goes in on its newcomers. Sophia, a sentient AI that lives in Joker's phone, is an early addition to their ranks and manages to endear herself quickly. She doesn't have the most prominent role through a large portion of the game, but her goal to understand humanity and discover what and who she is becomes much more relevant later on. We also get plenty of time with Zenkichi Hasegawa, a police inspector that's shadowing the party. Naturally, Joker and crew aren't too up for working with law enforcement, but learning more about Zenkichi and his motives alongside them carries a good portion of the game as well. Their openness to distrust and disparage him is pretty amusing though, and his role works off of players' expectations of adults in this series well. Not to spoil, but he also gets one of the game's best moments pretty much all to himself. Perhaps my biggest criticism towards the game as a whole is how familiar it is on a plot level. Despite the new surroundings, nearly every scenario feels evocative of something that happened in Persona 5. For example, starving artist Yusuke once again confronts someone profiting off the creative work of others, both openly and thematically calling back to his introductory arc in P5. While I wasn't expecting a rich narrative on par with the original, it's a shame to retread that ground so frequently. For anyone coming into Persona 5 Strikers without having played the first game, you won't have that same experience. Instead, you'll have this abridged take on the characters and glimpses of their more engrossing arcs and journey. And as for anyone expecting characters appearing from Royal, I'm sad to say that Strikers doesn't deliver there. What it does have, though, is enjoyable and faster gameplay at its backbone. I've no problem with the Shin Megami Tensei turn-based system, but giving me an actionized Warriors spin-off is the perfect pairing. More than One Piece, more than The Legend of Zelda, Persona 5 has fittingly taken the heart of the Musou gameplay and made it its own. I have to emphasize just how little of the typical Warriors experience is here. There's no holding off hordes as you defend sections of the map. There's no running from one place to another just to make sure an ally doesn't fall. There's no repetitive grinding to maximize a massive cast of characters, though there is some grinding for other things. This is not a Warriors game with Persona characters. This is a Persona game with Warriors combat. So, what exactly does that mean? Just like in Persona 5, you'll be making your way through the jails, darting from hiding spots and vantage points to ambush shadows. Once you do, they'll go from a single foe to a group of series familiar demons for you to cut loose on. And hey, fun fact I learned in Strikers. A group of Jack Frosts is called a He-Horde. Huh, you learned something new. These fights are as stylish as they are addicting, rewarding you for understanding how to exploit weaknesses and properly spec your party. You're allowed 4 characters on the field at once, fully playable and swappable at any time with a push of the D-pad direction, letting you cover multiple kinds of magic elements and skills to suit the enemy types in a jail. You'll not just have each character's signature weapon, but their own guns as well. Wielding these in tandem with the ability to leap off of and attack with environmental elements lets you approach situations in various ways. It's the personas that really make the game unique though, and by holding the R button, you'll stop the action when you summon your character's other self. This gives you all the time you need to choose your right skill or spell, and makes you feel even more like a stand user. Fittingly for our lead rebel, Joker gets to break the rules and wield multiple persona thanks to his wildcard ability. By collecting, leveling, and fusing personas, he can basically do anything you need him to with enough planning. If you're not so into persona management, you can just as easily rely on your teammates to handle things. But it's a testament to how much this game wanted to get the Persona series right that the hero isn't just locked to his trademark Arsene. The expected Warriors combo system of light and heavy attacks and character gimmicks is here and fits each of the Phantom Thieves, minus unplayable Navigator Futaba, well. Thanks to the gameplay, they also aren't as boxed into their RPG roles, like Morgana as a mage healer or Ryuji as a physical powerhouse, and they're more defined by their weapon type. They still have their specialties, but switching from one to the other is more about understanding their movesets than picking the right skill. From a Warriors perspective, it is unfortunate that the cast's list of techniques doesn't grow all that much. You do gain additional abilities, like Joker being able to mark an enemy with his gun to swoop in for a follow-up attack, but it did feel like everyone's combo tree was fairly small. This is compensated by the Persona movesets and mechanics, which are actually interwoven to the end of certain combo strings, so it does balance out once you get the hang of things. One other unfortunate loss from most Warriors games is the roster size. You're running wild with less than 10 characters overall, and with the game having been out in Japan for over a year already, there's really no sign of any DLC development. This would have been a great place to slot in characters from Persona 5 Royal, or even characters from older Persona titles. As is, this is the Phantom Thieves show, and they're not about to be upstaged. Still, this too is balanced out by the Velvet Room's familiar, though thankfully simplified, Persona Compendium. And that really is the core of Striker's gameplay. It's simplified and streamlined on both fronts to offer the best of these two games and developers. The pairing works just as well as curry with coffee, and for all it does well, it's easily one of the first must-play Switch games of 2021. It's also a must-see and hear game too. Everything you love about Persona 5's menus is back in Strikers. The UI is just as eye-catching, and transitions are smooth and full of character. Sophia's shop menu in particular is a favorite, both for how it looks and its theme music. And speaking of music, Strikers delivers in multiple ways as well. There are new compositions to enjoy, like the aforementioned shop theme, and its own infiltration music a la Life Will Change. I've also gotta shout out the music for Walking Around Sendai, which is a total bop that's been stuck in my head ever since I heard it. It's not just the new that's worth praising here either. Many familiar tracks are present, either in their original form or via new arrangements. These are often used in familiar circumstances or to punctuate what's happening on screen, giving them another added layer for anyone familiar with the source. A couple of these uses got the biggest smiles on my face throughout the entire game, and stand as another reason to come into Strikers after playing Persona 5. Talking Switch-specific performance and display, the game holds up well most of the time. This may be due to how large numbers of enemies only pop up during the fights as opposed to being present on the map continuously. I did encounter some minor slowdown, usually when using flashy showtime techniques in handheld mode, but nothing that hampered the overall experience. Lastly, while the menus are gorgeous, the game as a whole isn't quite as pretty as Persona 5. This applies both to the gameplay and cutscenes, though thankfully is only particularly pronounced in the latter. Really, it took going back and watching some scenes from P5 for the difference in quality that hit me, and it didn't pull me out of the story or action. That said, I do recommend playing while docked for the cleanest experience. Persona 5 Strikers may live in the shadow of its lauded game of origin, but with a source that good, it's not such a terrible place to be. Thanks to the Warriors-inspired gameplay and vacation theme, all wrapped up in that signature style, it's the best series spin-off since Persona 4 Arena. As a fan of both its inspirations on their own, I can comfortably recommend it, with the only caveat being it'll be better enjoyed having played Persona 5. Other than some issues with it retreading familiar ground and the absence of a few key pieces, this spin-off manages to feel like a genuine sequel to a modern classic. Consider this review a calling card. Persona 5 Strikers is out to take your heart, and these thieves haven't failed yet.